so we'll go ahead and get started. Hey everyone, nice to see all these faces, and I hope you're here to learn a little bit more about some ongoings in Web3 from one of the leaders in the space. I'm here with Elaine from the HBAR Foundation, and I'm from Accenture. I'm a senior manager in the digital currency practice, and I've been focusing on CBDCs, stablecoins, deposit tokens, and any modernized form of a cash leg in a transaction for the past few years. And I'm really excited to be here and moderating this session with Elaine. Elaine, do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. As Cam said, my name is Elaine. I lead strategy for the HBAR Foundation. The HBAR Foundation, you can consider us the growth and strategy studio / arm of the Hedera network. If you're not familiar with the Hedera network, we are an enterprise-grade, public permissioned DLT. We are unique on a couple of fronts. We have what we call our governing council, which is a group of up to 39 enterprises, institutions, academic institutions, so consider Boeing, Dell, LG, IBM, Google. All of these folks sit on our governing council to govern the future of the network, both from a technical but also a treasury perspective. The network itself also uses what's called the hash graph consensus algorithm, which is I would consider a more networked way to hash and manage data that makes the network much faster and much more seamless and much more scalable for enterprise-grade applications.
Great. And you know, one of the things that always struck me about the HBAR Foundation is from inception, there was an immense amount of institutional involvement, which is quite rare, I would say, in the permissionless public world. So one of my first questions that I have for you, Elaine, is how has the initial enterprise involvement and adoption with things like the Governance Council that you mentioned helped influence the strategy or direction that the HBAR Foundation goes in terms of its target audience, its use cases, and of the like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think culturally, a lot of our priorities tend to come from what we hear from our council members. So on our council, we have several banks who have been talking to us for years about what it means to look at the future of money and what it means to tokenize stable value assets on the network. And so over the course of the past 2 years, we've been working with banks like Shinhan Bank out of South Korea and Standard Bank out of South Africa to help them explore what the future of money looks like. Most recently, I believe it was in June, though time is a construct, and but I believe it was June. They released their most recent pilot on stablecoins, where they partnered with SCB-TechX, which is a tech arm of a Thai banking consortium, and a Taiwanese financial institution, where each of them tokenized their own local currency, so they issued their own stablecoins, and then they engaged in a 3-way multi-currency swap on-chain. Now, it was a pilot, but naturally, a lot of the efficiencies that you see on DLT were very pronounced. Fees coming down from like $75 to like $5. Transaction speeds going from 10 days to a couple minutes max for the end-to-end from minting and then swapping. And so, it's something that we work quite closely with our governing council members to understand what their pain points are. And the result of that really was both this pilot, but also what we're calling Stablecoin Studio, which is an open source product that allows for institutions like Shinhan Bank to issue stable value assets easily on the network.
That's great. And I would be remiss not to mention that one of the primary themes of today is central bank digital currency. So I think this institutional involvement almost at inception for a permissionless network is truly a differentiator in my mind. There's not many networks out there that had that from the get-go. And so I want to touch on a little bit more around the digital currency topic itself. I think the Stablecoin Studio we've discussed, I would love to hear a little bit more about that and to educate the audience on what that studio is and how it's enabling the issuance of stable value tokens or stable coins, and how that's making it easier for individuals to issue them and manage.
Yeah. In its current iteration, the Stablecoin Studio really is designed to address a couple of pain points that we heard from banks. The 2 pain points we hear are, one, the ability for the asset to scale. So, assuming you want to issue a stablecoin, it has to move quickly and be very cheap. or else it's not really usable by your average person or the bank itself. And the second thing is how to deal with an ambiguous and ever-changing regulatory environment in terms of what the standards are or what's going to be expected of the banks. And so from a technical perspective, given that we are only producing or providing the technical layer, what we focused on was how we can actually solve these challenges from in a technical way. And what we addressed was, and this is kind of unique to the Hedera network, but on Hedera, or specific to the Hedera network, I guess not unique, on Hedera, you can issue assets natively using the Hedera token service. So instead of issuing assets as smart contracts using either the ERC20 standard or any other standard, you can just issue them natively. Of course, we also have smart contract capability. So what we did was actually combine these two to allow you to issue assets in a hybrid manner. So at the base, you still have a Hedera token, which is incredibly fast and incredibly cheap. The token itself can scale to 10,000 TPS, and of course, from a fee perspective, uses a very fixed and low fee of, I think it's like 1/100th of a cent. So incredibly, incredibly cheap. On top of that, we allow issuers to wrap a management smart contract layer. So what this means is that as the issuer, you have programmable control over how the asset acts and who can engage with the asset. So we like to consider this our first foray into programmable compliance. It allows the issuer to have more control over the asset, and then that allows them to flex across different jurisdictions and different expectations that regulators might have.
Yeah, and I think, for those of us that work in the risk and compliance space, I think our ears started to perk up in the sense that if you hear the word programmable compliance, what does that really mean? And, in some ways, we are applying some permissions to the usage of tokens, and we're seeing this across a variety of networks. But I'm curious, from the HBAR Foundation standpoint, how the Stablecoin Studio, what sort of customers are coming on there and issuing, and where have you guys seen success thus far in its early days? And what use cases are they trying to tackle by issuing stable value tokens?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we are starting to see two themes of use cases emerge with regard to banks who are looking to issue, right? On the one hand, you have the use case that was represented in the pilot, which really is an institutional or corporate use case, right? How can I do an FX swap? Now that one I think is generally, as a use case, more protected because you know who your end users are and it's a very controlled environment. We also have institutions who are looking to expand that in a bit more retail ways, right? So they're looking to see how they can use this asset and have it expanded in a much more commercial way. I would say we're still pretty early, and I think right now the excitement has really been about the programmable compliance, right? I say it's really early just because people are still trying to figure out what they want to program. And so, at this current moment, we've enabled what we consider base features, right? So you can easily upgrade the smart contract if something changes and you need to adjust different considerations. You can, adjust the fields with regard to what type of KYC you want to have relevant. But to be completely honest, I would say it's exploratory. We are constantly working with our partners to see how they are looking to use this and what other tech features or updates might need to be enabled.
Yeah, and for those of you that are familiar with the BIS's Project Mandala report, and prior to that Dunbar, there's this emphasis on building in compliance by design in the way that we transact cross-border. So I think with Stablecoin Studio and what HBAR Foundation has contributed to the space in terms of making an accelerator to be able to issue stablecoins at scale, allows us as a first step to have a set of common standards that we can then apply. And then from there, we can embed some of the programmable compliance elements. So I'd love to hear, what are the biggest challenges in implementing programmable compliance for your customers, and how are they overcoming them, and why are they trying to overcome them?
Yeah. I think the biggest challenge is that they're not really sure, or that the expectations, I think, are either ambiguous or change. Right? So they're constantly trying to see what needs to be programmed. I think there are certain considerations that are fairly well understood and well adopted. So things like sanction lists or kind of whether they have like criminal records, or those types of things I think are generally well defined. But beyond that, in terms of the use of the asset, how the asset is actually regulated, I think that is still up in the air. And so I really think that kind of that flexibility that code provides you, I think is something that they're really excited about. The other challenge has been all of the collateral that goes around issuing and working with a stablecoin. So, all of the market infrastructure, all of the custodial infrastructure, all of the KYC, AML, all of those things, they need to be able to support this new type of asset. And the issuers need to have easy access to a curated menu, essentially, of providers who are going to provide them, high-end white glove service on these types of assets. So the other thing that's unique about the Stablecoin Studio is that we've actually worked with other industry partners to have them support the type of asset and then also offer their services to potential issuers. So we work with custodial partners, different wallets, different KYC AML providers. And so they really are looking to support the environment around using a stablecoin. Because I think as we all know, right, you can issue the asset, but then all of that collateral is kind of where the details are. And so we're really trying to make that part easier for institutions as well.
Yeah, and in the regulated financial space, when we advise our clients on digital asset strategy, I think one of the common hurdles that some of our clients have to overcome is, they may not want to become a technology provider. They may not want to build every single component that's necessary, like what Elaine was talking around, custody and collateral management and all those elements that might require entirely new infrastructure, and needless to say, also digital wallet infrastructure. So in some cases, I think there is this advantage to being able to rent or procure services that allow for that to be kind of less of a concern from a build standpoint. So I think that's an incredibly valuable way to approach allowing companies to issue and manage their stable coins. I guess one of my last questions, I'll have one more after this, but is in the world of the stable value tokens being issued in HBAR on the Hedera network, how are you seeing distinctions between regulated financial institutions getting involved in that versus more corporates, multinational corporates, and where do you feel there might be more strengths or drawbacks?
I think that distinction is starting to blur quite a bit. And I think if you think about kind of the history of fintech as an entire industry, right, that blurring of lines has happened for years now. I think probably what you're thinking of is the PayPal USD stablecoin and how these types of institutions are looking to issue essentially new business opportunities for their users, right? They are hyper-focused on what it means to be a PayPal customer and kind of what different features that they might expect. So, I think personally, we'll probably see a Cambrian explosion of stable value assets. I think in the next 5 years, we'll just see a ton, some probably more legitimate and credible than others. But I do think we'll start to see more people trying to tokenize their stable value on-chain. If we fast forward 10, 15 years, I'm sure that those numbers will come back down. But I also think one of the things that is kind of incumbent on us to think about now is how you can actually program in interoperability for these assets, right? Whether it's some sort of middleware that allows you to swap or bridge these assets easily, whether, like we've heard yesterday, some sort of like unified platform. I do think that generally has been the trend within our industry, which is you see a massive explosion of experiments, and then they start to dwindle down, and then they start to, kind of coalesce. So, I think we'll likely see a lot more kind of corporate private money, and then we'll start to see hopefully more CBDCs and have those kind of come to the market. But, I think it'll be a little bit of a pleasant mess in the near future.
And my final question, this has been awesome, is in terms of next steps moving forward and adoption, what is the HBAR thinking are the critical levers that need to be pulled to incite further adoption, both at the end user level as well as the institutional level?
Yeah, one thing that I heard that really kind of stuck with me in some of the panels yesterday was about being hyper-focused on the need, right? less focused on the tech stack, but focused on what the problem actually is. And I think the beauty of kind of the industry we work in is that code is very flexible, right? You can program code to do whatever you want it to do. So, I think focus on what the actual problem is, and then use the code to solve that. And I think that's why we're starting to see some of the early success of the Stablecoin Studio, which is that we have programmed it, or not we have programmed, but it's programmable, right? So you can program it to fit whatever kind of issuance needs that are required of your institution, of your corporate, or whatever. And so, if we can focus on the fact that we work in a very revolutionary industry where we have this technology that allows you to really, shape all of these new activities, then then it becomes, I think, very easy for it to be adopted, right? So that way you and I can use the next stablecoin or CBDC and whatnot.
Yeah, I certainly think the design-led strategy, thinking of the customer experience, is certainly something we can't forget as we build all of these new tools. But with that being said, I'd like to thank you, Elaine, for your time. This has been super insightful, and we appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me.